Hi, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today for Clinical Trials Explained, Know Your Options. We are in our final session of the series, Episode 6, Prevention, Genetics, and Early Detection. Our goal with this series has been to help patients, caregivers, and families better understand clinical trials so they can feel informed, empowered, and confident when exploring their options. Over the course of this series, we've covered so much together and had some amazing representatives in the field to talk about clinical trials. In episode 1 and 2, we laid the foundation, what clinical trials are and how research moves into patient care. Then we took it a step further and talked about how trials are structured and how to begin understanding them. Episode 3, we highlighted real clinical trials currently available right here in Michigan. Episode 4, we focused on how to actually find and enroll in a trial, what to ask, what to prepare, and what to expect. And in episode 5, we heard directly from the patients who have gone through the process and shared their real life experiences. Today, we're shifting the lens once again, this time focusing on what happens even earlier in the journey, looking at prevention, genetics, and early detection. A couple housekeeping notes. All attendees will be muted and the video will be off for the duration of the program. Please feel free to insert questions in the chat at any time. This session is also being recorded so it can be shared with others who may benefit. My name is Annie Dalton Flores. I'm the Executive Director of Sky Foundation. I'm joined by Jamie Geyer, our business manager, who is behind the scenes and happy to help if anyone on this webinar needs help with connection. She will share her information in the chat if she hasn't done so already. Sky Foundation, Inc. is a Michigan-based nonprofit organization founded by pancreatic cancer survivor Sheila Sky Castleman. Our mission is centered around two key areas: raising awareness and funding innovative research to improve early detection and treatment of pancreatic cancer. A major part of our work is focused on awareness, helping people understand their risk, the importance of genetic testing, and where those resources are available, especially here in our local community. Because for many individuals and families, knowledge of genetic risk can be one of the earliest opportunities to take action. The other half of our mission is funding research, specifically supporting bold, early-stage ideas that have the potential to transform how pancreatic cancer is detected. These are the type of projects that may lead to the new screening tools, blood tests, and earlier detection strategies that could ultimately change outcomes for patients. Because when it comes to pancreatic cancer, earlier detection can make all the difference. And that's exactly what today's conversation is about: understanding risk, exploring genetics and prevention-based approaches, and learning how clinical trials are playing a role in detecting this disease earlier than ever before. Now, before I introduce our speakers, I'd like to hand it over to our partner in this webinar series, TRICAN Health.
Thank you, Annie. I can't believe we're at the 6th episode of this series. It's amazing. It has gone by incredibly fast, and I've learned a lot, and I hope other people have as well. I'm Kimya Harris. I'm the CEO and co-founder of TRICAN Health. TRICAN Health exists for one single reason, and that is to make sure that every patient with cancer has access to potentially life-saving medicines through clinical trials. And I think a lot of people out there don't think much about clinical trials as, a treatment option to access to life-saving treatments. But the recent news in pancreatic cancer that we've heard in the last couple of weeks, and hopefully many of you are familiar with it, about the new targeted drugs targeting RAS mutations in pancreatic cancer. For those of you that haven't heard, the news was that their clinical trial results were truly incredible. The survival rates for the patients treated with this new drug, and this was a trial from Revolution Medicines, the survival rates were double of those treated with standard of care. And I think that really emphasizes the power of clinical trials and the fact that these new advanced treatments like this targeted therapy, which is really going to change the whole paradigm of how we approach pancreatic cancer in the future, they're only available in clinical trials as they're being researched and tested. So clinical trials are a powerful option and something to consider for treatment. Unfortunately, though, most people don't know that. They don't know how to find them. They don't know where to look. And TRICAN Health was built to change that. And we started in pancreatic cancer. We want to make sure everybody knows where to look, has the ability to navigate a site, get information, and talk to their doctors about their options, because knowledge really is power. I came to found TRICAN Health through a combination of my professional and personal experience. Professionally, I have been in the cancer research and drug development space for my entire career, starting with a PhD in cancer research right there at the University of Michigan. I also come to it as a personal patient with personal experience as a patient, having been diagnosed with breast cancer twice in my 30s. And also as a caregiver, having watched my mother battle pancreatic cancer for 18 months. And that combination of personal and professional experiences with cancer and treatment options showed me that there is this gap in understanding and access for patients to clinical trials. And I knew I wanted to do something to solve for that gap, but I didn't quite know how. And that's where my co-founder, Mike, comes in. So Mike.
Thanks, Kimmy, and good morning, everyone. My background is in technology, so I'm a Michigan native, went to Michigan Business School as well, and applied most of my career to helping match together providers of technology with organizations that were looking to integrate that technology. And when Kimya set about the mission for TRICAN Health and helping patients do a similar kind of matching, but at a much more personal, much more important level, I wanted to take my skills and abilities around building technology platforms, applying artificial intelligence, scaling organizations, and apply that to the work that we do at TRICAN. So my effort is to help build the platform, make it run really efficiently, and make it as effective as possible, not only for patients, but also for the physicians that they work with, to make sure that patients and their doctors can make collaborative decisions on whether or not trials are right for them.
Thank you so much, Kimmy and Mike. It has been honestly amazing to see what the platform has done for patients and just the accessibility of being able to go on and find the information you need and understand the information. It's really a game changer, and it has helped so many people and patients that I've talked to already. So thank you, Kimmy and Mike. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce our speakers. First up today is Sarah Volk. Sarah is a clinical research coordinator senior in the Division of Gastroenterology and Hepatology at Michigan Medicine and a certified clinical research professional. She brings over 23 years of research experience at the University of Michigan and currently serves as lead coordinator for the Cancer of Pancreas Screening and Pre-Seed Early Detection Studies. Her work focuses on clinical trials related to pancreatic cancer screening and early detection, helping identify individuals at a higher risk and connecting them to research aimed at catching this disease earlier. Our second speaker today is Dr. Kimya Harris, who you just heard from. She is the co-founder of TRICAN Health. This platform is dedicated to helping patients and caregivers find and navigate clinical trial options. She brings both professional expertise and a personal connection, which she shared, to pancreatic cancer, which has driven her passion to improving access to clinical trials and empowering patients with the tools and information they need to make informed decisions. Through TRICAN Health, Dr. Harris has is helping bridge the gap between research and real-world access, making it easier for individuals to explore prevention, genetic, and early detection trials. Welcome, Sarah and Kimya.
Thanks, Annie. Let me just get through the most nerve-wracking part of sharing my screen. Can you confirm if you can see?
Yep, we can see.
Perfect. All right, thanks so much to Annie and the Sky Foundation and Trican Health. I appreciate the opportunity to be here today and talk a little bit about what we do at Michigan Medicine. I've been with the Division of Gastroenterology and Hepatology for many years, and I work directly and closely with our interventional endoscopists. And within our division, we have a program focused solely on early detection and prevention of pancreatic cancer. And our center is a National Pancreas Foundation Center of Excellence. And we are aiming to identify pancreatic cancer at an earlier stage when it's most treatable. And we do that through high-risk screening annually in our high-risk patients, through genetic counseling and risk assessment, and through multidisciplinary clinical care. We have advanced imaging technologies, and we participate in a lot of biomarker research. So why is early detection so important? If you take a look at this graph on the left side, the larger bar, this represents the 5-year survival rate when pancreatic cancer is detected at an earlier stage of stage 1. And compared to the much smaller bar on the right, this is the 5-year survival rate when pancreatic cancer is detected much later at stage 4. And so this is just a good representation that survival rates differ dramatically based on the stage at diagnosis. And we are really hoping to find the best ways to early detect and ultimately prevent. And so who is considered high risk for pancreatic cancer, and who should potentially consider annual high risk screening? So our patients who are at a higher risk have a strong family history of pancreatic cancer. They may have had genetic testing where an inherited gene mutation associated with a higher risk has been identified. I've listed some genes here that are more well-known. This is not a comprehensive list, but some of the more well-known genes are the ATM mutation, BRCA1 and BRCA2, CDKN2A, and the PALB2. And most people recognize BRCA1 and BRCA2 for having higher risk of breast cancer and ovarian cancer, but pancreatic has also been included as a higher risk for certain mutations for the BRCA genes. And patients who have a history of pancreatitis or pancreas cysts may also be at a higher risk. I do want to note that having risk factors does not mean that you will develop pancreatic cancer. However, screening can help monitor changes throughout the years and identify changes early. So how do we screen annually if you're at a higher risk? So currently, the national screening guidelines alternate annually between an MRCP, which is short for magnetic resonance cholangiopancreatography, and endoscopic ultrasound, or EUS for short. And so what do those involve? So the MRCP is an MRI technique, and it produces detailed images of the pancreas and the pancreatic ducts. And it's really effective for identifying pancreatic cysts, ductal strictures, inflammation, and tumors. And what patients typically experience is that it usually takes around 45 minutes to complete. There's no radiation involved, and there's no sedation involved. Endoscopic ultrasound is a minimally invasive procedure. We do that here in our outpatient medical procedures unit. And endoscopic ultrasound combines upper endoscopy and ultrasound to examine the digestive tract and the nearby organs. So as you can see from the image on the right, the pancreas is highlighted in yellow. It kind of sits behind the stomach. So our advanced interventional endoscopists, they will go in with an upper scope through the mouth, through the esophagus, down through the stomach, and into the first part of your small bowel. And from there, using their ultrasound techniques, they can then take a good look at your pancreas. And EUS is highly effective for detecting pancreatic cysts, tumors, pancreatitis. And a big advantage of EUS is that we can take biopsies of pancreatic tissue. We can aspirate cyst fluid. So it's very beneficial. And oftentimes patients ask, why not one or the other? Why not MRCP only, endoscopic ultrasound only? They really complement each other. MRCP is very good for identifying the really small cysts in the pancreas, and endoscopic ultrasound is very useful for looking inside the cyst and looking at features inside the cyst. So the two techniques really do complement each other, and that's why it's recommended that we alternate annually between them for our high-risk patients. And if there's any worrisome features that are found, that annual window may shorten, determined, of course, by your doctors and multidisciplinary care team. And a quick note about patient experience for endoscopic ultrasound. As I mentioned, it's an outpatient procedure, and it's performed with sedation for patient comfort. And it's not as deep as a general anesthesia. It's similar to the anesthesia you would receive if you're having a colonoscopy. So what are they looking for when they're doing the MRCP or the endoscopic ultrasound? They are taking a look to see if you have any cysts present in your pancreas. And over the years, they'll measure and monitor the size of the cysts. Are they growing over time? Are they rapidly growing? They'll take a look at features such as wall thickness. And they're also looking at the pancreatic ducts within the pancreas. Are they widening? Are they narrowing? Are they changing over the years? And they can get a good look at the pancreatic tissue overall. They can see if there's inflammation, scarring, or fatty changes. And so moving on to a little bit about research, I've been involved in research a very long time, and we do a lot of research at Michigan Medicine. And I wanted to briefly highlight the differences between interventional and observational research studies. The column on the left, if we're talking about interventional studies, those studies typically assign a specific treatment to measure safety and efficacy. For example, if there's a new drug or a new device being studied, and those usually test cause and effect. And interventional studies typically use randomization to compare groups. For example, an active treatment group or a placebo. And randomization is just a fancy word to say that there's an unbiased entity assigning which group that you might be assigned to for that study. Typically, it's a computer coded program that does the randomization. So if you look at the column on the right, when we talk about observational studies, they tend to identify trends, risk factors, long-term outcomes, and often use a cohort design instead of randomization. There's no randomization involved, and they analyze existing data. And observational studies will monitor subjects without influencing care. And ultimately, observational studies tend to have a lower risk to the patient, but both really are critical to improving prevention and early detection strategies. And I just wanted to briefly highlight two of our observational studies here at Michigan Medicine that we're still currently enrolling. They're called CAPS-5 and PRECEDE, and they're both actively enrolling patients and families who have a family history of pancreatic cancer and or a gene mutation associated with a higher risk. And so our patients who are undergoing annual surveillance, that MRCP or the EUS, that's performed as standard of care, and there's no experimental treatment involved for participating in these observational studies. So what does it look like from a patient experience if you're enrolled in a study such as CAPS-5 and PRECEDE? Our study team would walk you through the informed consent document, and that's a document that outlines everything, why we're doing the study, what's involved, what your risks and benefits are to participating. For our observational studies, participation does not affect clinical decision-making. That's all done by your doctors and your care team. And what we would be collecting is the screening results from that MRCP, the endoscopic ultrasound, any clinical notes related to your pancreas screening care, and we de-identify all the data that we collect, meaning that as true with most studies, there's a unique study code assigned to you as a patient that follows along with your data while you're on study. And so your name, your social security number, no personal information is attached to the data as we're monitoring your pancreas throughout the years. And while you're on study, our study team may ask for additional information about your medical record, your medical history, especially in relation to cancer diagnoses within your family. And while you're on study, we may ask for blood samples at certain visits related to your pancreas screening. And we may ultimately, we try to assist with making sure your screening stays up to date, because we know how important that is for high-risk individuals. Because again, our overall goal is detecting pancreatic cancer as early as possible in hopes that it's treatable. And just briefly, a little bit about each one of those studies. The CAPS-5 study, we love a good acronym in science. CAPS-5 stands for Cancer of the Pancreas Screening. The number 5 is just indicative of the study iteration. The studies out of Johns Hopkins. And many, many years ago, Johns Hopkins started CAPS 1, 2, 3, and 4. CAPS 5 is the multi-center version of which U of M is a part of. And as you can see from the map, there are 9 US sites enrolling for CAPS 5. It's funded through the NIH, or the National Institutes of Health. And we have been enrolling here at U of M since late 2019. And ultimately, CAPS 5 has helped establish the national screening guidelines for high-risk individuals. And we're aiming to develop blood tests to be used as a diagnosis tool for pancreatic cancer and any other abnormalities that can lead to cancer. And the PRECEDE study, again, another great acronym, stands for Pancreatic Cancer Early Detection Consortium. And PRECEDE is an international multi-center study, as you can see from the map. And it really connects patients and researchers around the world to accelerate discovery and prevention through, it's really a global effort focused on early detection. And the coordinating center for PRECEDE is here in Ann Arbor, Michigan, the Arbor Research Collaborative for Health. And the funding for PRECEDE is through the PRECEDE Foundation. And there are currently 57 international sites enrolling. And here at U of M, we've been enrolling since early 2020. So why participate in these observational studies? So really, you can contribute to an earlier diagnosis and detect cancer at a more treatable stage. And it really helps us improve survival rates and outcomes for future generations, even potentially within your own family. Our patients who are enrolled here for CAPS and PRECEDE, we have a lot of family members enrolled, and we really appreciate their participation. And most of our families enrolled, and patients in general, most of them understand what it's like to lose a family member to pancreatic cancer. So most of them welcome any way to help both themselves, their families, and future generations to try and make some progress towards preventing this disease in general. And again, like CAPS 5, one of the main missions of CAPS 5 is to shape future screening guidelines. Studies like these, the long-term data that we're collecting, is really going to be able to tell us if we need to change or shift the guidelines for those high-risk individuals. So thanks again so much for having me. If anyone would like any further information about our GI clinics, our genetic counseling, to discuss risk assessment, or what annual screening looks like for you, and if you might be considered high risk, feel free to reach out to me directly. My email address is on the slide. You can also use this QR code for more information about our interventional endoscopists and our clinics in Michigan Medicine. And I'm always happy to facilitate getting anyone into any of our clinics if that's something you're interested in. And this really is a collaborative effort for changing the future of pancreatic cancer. So thanks again to the Sky Foundation and TRICAN.
Thank you, Sarah. That was an incredible talk. I learned so much about the insider's view of those clinical trials and the work that you're doing as the person responsible for coordinating those trials. I am now going to share my screen. As you said, Sarah, it's the most stressful part of the talk. All right, let's see. Okay, hopefully we're in presentation mode. Let me know if we're not. So Sarah, you did an excellent job of talking about the various preventive and diagnostic clinical trials and how important they are. I want to share a perspective that sort of, so you talked about being inside the trials and what it's like inside the institutions. I want to step back first and talk about what it's like to be a patient or a relative of a patient or someone in that sort of high risk category. And that's because I have personal experience in this space. So when I was facing my own breast cancer diagnoses, and after I'd sort of gotten over the initial shock and come up with a treatment plan, I immediately went to thinking about my family members, and specifically my two daughters and my sister, because I had breast cancer. And I wanted to know, how do we keep an eye on them? How do we monitor them and catch it early if, heaven forbid, they end up with it? How do we have this sort of sonar that you see on my screen to, to look for something that we can barely see with the naked eye? And then similarly, after my mom passed from pancreatic cancer, I was well aware that there is this connection between pancreatic cancer and breast cancer and some shared risk factors between them. And so I started thinking about, well, what is my risk here? What are my daughter's risks again? How can we be monitored? And it wasn't until I started building TRICAN and the database of trials for TRICAN that I discovered that there were actually trials out there specifically for people like me, relatives of people with pancreatic cancer, people at a higher than normal risk of developing the disease. And that sort of opened up this whole world of preventive and diagnostic trials for me that I didn't know existed. And Sarah, you did a great job of talking about this and you had pretty graphs, so I'll just touch on it briefly. But these methods of trying to build ways to detect pancreatic cancer earlier, to monitor for it, are incredibly important because the outcomes look much different. Sarah's graph showed us that if you detect the cancer at stage 1, where it's very localized, your chances of 5-year survival are close to 50%, compared to if it's detected at the metastatic stage, where the chances are closer to 3%. And a big part of this is if we diagnose it in time for surgery, you can increase a patient's survival by more than 10-fold. And yet only 14% of cases are diagnosed at this early stage. So these trials to develop methods to improve our early detection are incredibly important, not only to help individuals who are at high risk, but also to ultimately change the outcomes for patients that do have cancer, because we can catch it earlier. So who do we talk about when we talk about people that are good candidates for these types of trials, these diagnostic trials? Again, Sarah touched on this. I put it into 3 categories. Category 1 is the high-risk individuals. So these are the individuals with a genetic risk, and I've listed some of them here: BRCA1, 2, PALB2 mutations, something in your genome, your inherited genome, that makes you considered to be at higher risk of developing pancreatic cancer. The second category is the family risk. So more than one of your first or second degree family members has been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. So this would be the bucket that I would fall into. The second category I call category 2, and that's individuals with predisposing conditions. So there's a lot of research now that's suggesting that sudden onset type 2 diabetes may be a predisposing factor or something that indicates a risk for pancreatic cancer. And then other diseases of the pancreas, including pancreatitis or these IPMNs or pancreatic cysts, which I like to think about as polyps, early polyps in the colon. They themselves are not cancer, but they may be indicative of a much higher risk for continuing on to become cancer. And the third category is this, I would say it's a newer category, and this is the patients who have had cancer and were treated and now have no evidence of disease. So their scans are clean, their treatment was successful, and they want to be monitored. I mean, I have many conversations with patients in this group who often say, what do I do now? I'm thrilled to be in this category, but how do I stay vigilant? What can I do? And so if you fall into any one of these groups, or if you are a pancreatic cancer patient and you are worried about your family members that may fall into one of these groups, you can look for preventive and diagnostic trials using the Trican Health platform. And if it's all right with you, I'm going to switch screens now and do a demo of how to do a search on the Trican Health platform. So now you should all be looking at my screen, which should have the Trican webpage available, our homepage. And I'll just point out again, as we have in other episodes in this series, that we have a Learn page, which has tremendous resources about clinical trials, about pancreatic cancer, all sorts of useful information and publications. And I really encourage you to use those resources. But let's go to find a trial, because I want to show you how you can look for these preventive trials. And I will say that we call them all preventive. They're not necessarily preventive. They may be diagnostic, they may be monitoring. Right now, we use preventive as a catch-all term. So the first question on our site is, what kind of cancer do you have? And in this case, because we're looking before someone has developed cancer, we would say right at the top, no cancer, search preventive trials only. And then the next question is, please share your location. And since Sarah is in Ann Arbor, we're going to use Ann Arbor as our location. And that is it. Those are the only two questions that you have to answer when you're looking for preventive trials. And that's because this is a group of people who don't have cancer. So in general, so if your prior treatments, whether or not you had surgery, what stage it is, those questions are not relevant. So we see our results. We have 9 results, 9 preventive trials in the Ann Arbor, Michigan area. I mean, that in and of itself to me is really surprising. I had no appreciation for the fact that there was a lot of research going on in this area. So you'll see right away, the first 2 trials are the trials that Sarah told us about. There's the CAPS-5 trial. So let's take a look at that. And again, for those of you that are new to our platform and haven't seen the prior episodes, every trial on the Trican Health platform is shown in the same way. And it is a trial snapshot format. And for every trial, we show you the title of the trial. Up here, we show you the type of treatment that it is. Every trial is summarized the same way. So this trial describes that patients will undergo screening tests with imaging, blood and pancreatic fluid collection, and they are looking for signs or symptoms of pancreatic cancer before the disease is diagnosed and progresses. This is a large trial. So if you scroll down here, you can see that there are 9,000 projected participants. And that's because to do a true diagnostic test and make it statistically significant, you need large numbers. So these trials tend to be very large. The treatment groups are shown visibly here, and you can see the treatment groups look very similar for each of the cohorts. I'll talk to you in a minute about what the cohorts are. The The location, you can see we've got Ann Arbor, Michigan is a location. If you look down here, it shows you the contact information, none other than Sarah Volk, shown right here. So you could directly reach out to Sarah about and inquire about this trial. If you wanted to look for other locations, you could click See All Locations and see the other places in the country where this trial is being run. And then when we get to the bottom here, this is where the eligibility criteria is shown. And what you'll see is to qualify for this trial, you need to be in one of the categories that we talked about before, which is hereditary pancreatitis, strong family history of pancreas cancer, or confirmed germline mutation. So again, this is a screen for high-risk individuals. And if you're interested in this trial, or if you're a pancreatic cancer patient and you want to share this with a family member and say, you may want to look into this, you can click share. You can share it as a PDF, as a link, as an email, or you can say save and create an album of trials like this that you ultimately want to share with a family member. If we go back to our list and we look at the second trial that Sarah talked about, that's the PRECEDE trial. And you'll notice right away, it looks exactly the same formatting, and that's intentional to make it easy for users to sort of get the hang of it, because this is really complicated information. And again, here we have another screening study. It is doing blood samples. So you can see here in the treatment groups, there are blood samples. That's what the treatment, but it's not really treatment, of course, it's observational as we learned. And it's another large enrollment. There are 20,000 projected participants in this trial. So it's a really big trial. In this case, again, it's in Ann Arbor. Again, Sarah is the clinical trial lead on this trial. And so her information is included. And we have eligibility criteria down here. This is a little more detailed because they've sort of separated each of the categories of people that could qualify for this trial, be it, someone with familial risk, someone with a mutation, someone with predisposing conditions. They're all in different categories. So this looks really long. And my advice is share this with your physician and say, would I fit into one of these categories? And again, share it with your physician. How do you do that? Copy the link, download it, email it, or create an album and do it all at once. And then I just want to take 1 minute to show you one more trial, which is called the Oracle trial, because this is an example of the type of trial which is for monitoring. So in this case, it is for patients basically monitoring to see if there's signs of recurrence, if the cancer is coming back. And it's a blood test that looks for small bits of cancer DNA that might be indicative of minimal residual disease, or some, the disease may be coming back and may indicate that more screening or scanning is necessary. And so here it's not in Ann Arbor, if you look at the location, but it's quite nearby in Toledo, Ohio, and also across the country. But this is the type of trial, this Oracle trial that fits with our category 3 people, the people that are in that state of they have no evidence of disease and they want to keep vigilant and make sure it doesn't come back. And so with that, I am now going to go back to my slides. And I want to conclude by telling you that what we have talked about over the last 6 episodes is the importance of clinical trials and how they are a treatment option. You'll hear us say it over and over again. And this idea that people tend to think of clinical trials as something that you do, as shown here, when nothing else works. I hope that we have reframed that thinking in general and helped people to understand that clinical trials are a true treatment option for patients, where patients can get access to the most advanced treatments and they can get those treatments today, and that they should be considered starting at initial diagnosis and at every treatment decision after that. In today's webinar, I hope we have helped you to understand that there's actually this world that clinical trials are an option even before onset, even for people that don't have the disease, but that maybe are a family member like me and want to stay vigilant and want to be monitored for the disease, and also help in the research and development towards future diagnostic tools, so that ultimately, as we can start to detect this disease earlier, we will really meaningfully shift the survival rates for everyone with pancreatic cancer. And so clinical trials are relevant for every step of the pancreatic cancer journey, including before a diagnosis. And I want to end with this one thought, which is cancer can change lives, but clinical trials can change cancer. Thank you.
Wow, that was incredible information once again. And it's really nice to know that those family members that are going through this have ways to help too, that are bigger than, being an advocate is one thing, but actually taking action and enrolling in these trials gives you a whole another world of opportunity. So I do want to wrap up today, but before I do, Mike, was there any questions that you wanted to ask Sarah or Kimya?
Yes, I just had one question, probably to you, Sarah, and I'm thinking on behalf of the patients that are listening to this, which is you mentioned 2 annual screens, and you suggested alternating between that type of MRI called MRCP and then the endoscopic ultrasound, EUS. As you said, we all love our acronyms. And that makes perfect sense, right? Alternate those one year, then the next to try those different methods. You said they complementary and so forth. My question is, insurance is always a question that patients have. Does insurance cover the cost of those tests? Would they need to have either genetic testing or have a family history in order to get those paid for? Just any comments that you've had kind of being involved in those tests specifically. And then is there any relation to the trials that you mentioned? If I'm a patient and I'm coming to U of M for treatment, how would I think about that from an insurance perspective? If you could just elaborate on that, please.
Yeah, that's a great question, and a question that I get all the time from patients. And first, I want to start with patients will often ask me, if I participate in your studies, are the MRCP and the EUS, are they paid for by the study? That, unfortunately, and the answer to that is no. Since these patients are at a higher risk, and the screening is done as part of their standard of care, I'm no insurance expert, but I find that most insurances do tend to cover it. And it really depends on the diagnosis codes that are used. If has been genetic testing done, if the patient is shown to have an inheritable gene mutation, that's noted in the diagnosis code. If there's a family history, it's typically noted in one of the codes that are used. Again, I'm no expert in that area. But the insurance landscape is definitely changing recently, especially typically these procedures are covered, but I can't speak to everyone's insurance or the changing landscape. But
Of course.
Yeah.
But you mentioned the higher risk and then the potential for genetic testing. So that might be something, if I'm a patient and I'm concerned about higher risk because I have relatives who've had these diseases, then it might be something that I speak with my doctor about, see if I can get the genetic testing, and then that might help tip the scales, if you will, so that insurance would be inclined to cover these things.
Yep, and just an added note to that, when our patients are coming in wondering if they're high risk, wondering what their risk assessment is, and if they should undergo screening, the process for that is to first be seen in one of our clinics, whether it's the GI genetics clinic to do the genetic testing if it's never been done. And those genetic counselors, they can order the MRCP and the EUS, but then following up with that annually, then our high-risk patients are seen in our GI clinic. and our GI clinic providers review their scan results and the reasoning for screening going ahead, and they can also order the MRCP and the EUS. So having that communication with your care team, and with your care team being the providers to order the tests and put in the appropriate diagnosis codes, that definitely, I would say, tips the scales in the patient's favor from an insurance standpoint.
Great, thank you. And then just one final question, Kimia, this is a softball question to you, which is, we're talking about costs and insurance coverage and so forth. What does it cost to use this service of Trican Health to identify which trials are right for a given patient?
Ooh, I love this question. It is free. Our platform is free for patients, for clinicians, for anyone out there that wants to use the site. So please use it. It is there for you, and it is free.
Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you, everyone. So as we wrap up today, and really this entire series, I want to take a moment to reflect on what we've learned together. Over the past several weeks, we've covered a lot, and I highly suggest that you go back, you watch each individual episode. The information on there is invaluable, and the people speaking to this information are experts in the field. But if we had to simplify it down, there are a few key takeaways that I hope you carry with you. First, once again, as Kimia mentioned in her presentation, clinical trials are not a last option. They should be part of the conversation early and often. Your oncologist will always welcome any clinical trial you find and present to them. And if you don't want to explore them, and if they don't feel that you should explore them, then maybe you should explore different teams that are open to that. Second, there's no placebo in clinical trials for pancreatic cancer. Clinical trials for pancreatic cancer do not leave patients without treatment. If you participate in a clinical trial, you are receiving care, often either the current standard of care alone or the standard of care combined with a new treatment that's being studied. Patients are carefully monitored throughout the process, and the researchers compare outcomes to better understand whether a new approach may improve survival, response, or quality of life compared to the existing treatments. And if someone's not part of a clinical trial, they still receive the current standard of care available to pancreatic cancer. This disease moves aggressively, which is why it's important to advocate for yourself and ask questions early and understand all available options, including clinical trials. Third, you have more options than you may realize, whether that's different trials, different institutions, surgeons, or different approaches. There are often paths forward that aren't immediately visible. Choosing your hospital's team needs to be a good fit, someone that listens, supports your best possible outcomes. Fourth, you don't have to navigate this alone. Between your care team, organizations like Sky Foundation, and tools like Trican Health provide, there are people and resources here to support you. Sky Foundation will often provide you with information that can help those that are newly diagnosed, like direction on your care teams, surgeons, and even other survivors that can help you navigate. Trican Health is another absolutely huge resource that you can rely on to help find trials and present those trials to your doctors. And finally, knowledge is power. Understanding your diagnosis, your risk, your genetics, and your options puts you in a position to make informed, confident decisions. And that's really what this entire series has been about. Not just explaining clinical trials, but helping people feel more confident, more informed, and more supported as they navigate something incredibly difficult. The future of pancreatic cancer care is being shaped every day through research, through clinical trials, and through patients who are willing to explore their options. But those options only matter if people understand them. That being said, I want to give a big heartfelt thank you for taking the time to learn and for being part of this community. Thank you to all of our amazing speakers, to Trican Health, and thank you to you for being an active advocate. Now you know your options, and that's where everything begins. We hope to see you all again. Thank you.